Hello everybody, good morning. Welcome to this first session of the day dedicated to the circular bioeconomy. My name's James Astle. I write for The Economist magazine and I'm pleased to be moderating this session this morning. So the circular bioeconomy, as you all know, I'm sure, really is an idea that has come 5 years ago, 3 years ago, we just weren't hearing it discussed. But I guess in every session that I've moderated here at WFC, there has been at least some mention or discussion of the circular bioeconomy, whether that session has been about finance or whether it's been about sustainable wood value chains. There has been some mention of the circular bioeconomy. So it's very good, it's very welcome, it's very prescient that we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the subject this morning. Today's event is organized by the FAO, by C4 ICRAF, and by the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance. And it's going to be organized into three main parts. First, a panel putting the forest-based bioeconomy at the heart of building back better policies, that is, seeing it in a national and regional policy context. Then we'll have a second panel to get some messages from business, where they're making progress on circularity, how they look at the issue. And then a third panel to give us a few more snapshots on innovations and multi-staker groups that are organizing themselves around the circular bioeconomy. Some of our panelists will speak in Spanish, so please be prepared to use the headsets that you should have ready to hand. And with that, may I invite the first panel to take the stage. Oh, and as they do, let me introduce my colleague Sven Walter, who is the Senior Forestry Officer in charge of sustainable forest products from FAO. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. It's great to be here. And it's actually great, as you said, to put a bit the bioeconomy into perspective. We heard it everywhere. It's a new concept. On the other side, we will talk about principles. I think we talk about since a long time. But now they're put into another concept, and that is very exciting. It was also exciting to see the video we just showed. We just thought, OK, let's put this computer simulation of a wood construction project in Libreville on the screen, because I assume we will get back to it during the session. And in some of the sessions earlier this week, we talked about the built environment sometimes as the elephant in the room. And so attacking that elephant, I think, will be exciting if we remember that 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions, they come from the sector. And we have forest products as an option to substitute these emissions. So let me first welcome, on behalf of FAO, all the colleagues here who joined today's session on the contribution of forest circular bioeconomy to sustainable development. It builds on the plenary session we had actually yesterday on wood, the most ancient raw material, taking us to the future. A future that already began. Now, in this first segment, it's really great to have a lot of friends and colleagues with us, with whom we in FAO, we work together since a long time. We have Mark Palahi, who will join us remotely from Finland. It's very early for you, Mark, from the European Forest Institute, who is a partner and also a co-organizer of the session, and with whom we are working since a long time on the topic. It's a privilege you have His Excellency Mr. Lee White, Minister of Water, Forest and Sea Environment of Gabon, with us. They are also hosting our sub-regional office, actually, which is a good occasion for us to work with them. And you will see that they show a very strong commitment to expand, actually, the forest-based bioeconomy. Equally, having from Uruguay, Mr. Carlos Farropa here, who is the director in the Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture and Fisheries of Uruguay. And actually, Uruguay is the first country that received support by FAO on the sustainable and circular bioeconomy. Last but not least, we will see a video of Ms. Virginia Puzzolo. And she is a long-term member of the FAO Working Group on Bioeconomy. and she provided many lessons learned from the Circular Bio-Based Europe joint undertaking. And it's great that we have the opportunity to get some lessons learned from her also during the session. I do believe that the composition of this first segment of the session already shows the importance of collective work. And that, of course, includes all of us. Only last Monday, we launched the State of the World's Forest 2022, which provides clear pathways to support countries to build inclusive and sustainable green economies. And this is in line with this year's theme of the International Day on Forest, and that is forests and sustainable production and consumption. Actually, we celebrated this on the 21st of March with a big event in Dubai at the Expo. In this session, we can see how the transition to the bioeconomy actually can contribute to this major pathway identified in SOFO. FAO has been supporting member countries in bioeconomy and in bioeconomy development since 2015, when we received the mandate from more than 60 ministers of agriculture at the Global Forum for Food and Agriculture to coordinate international work on so-called food first, sustainable bioeconomy. So when we are here at the World Forestry Congress, we should not forget the other sectors. They all contribute to the bioeconomy. We need to work together. Through the Towards Sustainable Bioeconomy project that was supported by the government of Germany, FAO is working with countries in the development of coherent, sustainable, and circular bioeconomy programs that follow a set of 10 aspirational principles and 24 criteria for a sustainable bioeconomy. And one example is climate change mitigation. Moving toward a carbon-neutral society requires all of us to use more fossil-free materials and zero-polluting industries that replace carbon-intensive products and processes like plastics, concrete, steel, and synthetic chemicals. I think we will have a session here also with the private sector. Let's hear from them. Trees and forests provide nearly 20% of global biomass and offer huge potential for providing sustainable bio-based products as renewable alternatives, including construction materials, biomaterials, and bioenergy, by significantly reducing greenhouse gas emissions. However, investment is needed at global level. At the last IPCC report reveals achieving the forest-related mitigation potential of 6 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year would cost around $400 billion per year by 2050. But we have a good pitch, because sustainable bioeconomy practices in forestry can not only mitigate climate change, but also help replace polluting manufacturing processes with circular business models that minimize waste, improve biodiversity and ecosystem services, and create rural and green jobs. The bioeconomy plays a key role in sustainable and circular agri-food systems, as it contributes to increasing productivity, preserving nature, restoring ecosystems, and harnessing opportunities for research and innovation. In FAO, we believe that the bioeconomy and circular agri-food systems can contribute to decouple growth from degradation of natural resources and waste generation, staying within the planetary boundaries and meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the goals of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. We will talk about restoration later, which FAO co-leads and where forestry and bioeconomy have a key role to play. So to conclude, forest-based bio-innovations, including bio-based technological, organizational, and social innovations, which we also discussed earlier in earlier sessions of the Congress, can help us to mitigate climate change, tackle biodiversity loss, restore ecosystems, and transform production systems to a more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable ones, while promoting inclusive economic growth and increasing social equity, leaving no one behind. So let's continue this collaboration between all of us, and let's try to strengthen and to broaden this partnership. I mentioned already the the session here. This is a partnership which we all should engage in with one common goal: to develop sustainable bioeconomy with forest and forest products that is better for the planet and that leaves no one behind. Thanks a lot, and enjoy the session. James, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sven. Now we're going to hear from my friend Mark Palahi. Mark's the director of the European Forest Institute, a leader of the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance, the leader of the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance, and he's joining us live from Finland. There he is.
Thank you, James. Good morning from the European Forest Institute headquarters here in Finland. First of all, let me thank my colleagues from FAO and CIFOR for the great collaboration that has made this event possible. And in the next 6 minutes, I would like to share a few reflections about the concept of the circular bioeconomy and the central role that our forests should play in transitioning to it. But first of all, it is important that I highlight that the multidimensional crises that are converging today and are accelerating each other, the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, the COVID crisis, are not different crises. They are just different consequences of the same fundamental problem, our economic system. A system, remember, that is addicted to fossil resources and to growth at all costs, and a system that has failed systematically to value our most important capital and the basis for human health and well-being, which is nature. And having arrived at the present tipping point, we clearly need to rethink our economy if we want to rewrite our future still on time. In my opinion, we need a new economy where life, remember, bio means life, a new economy where life and not consumption becomes its true engine and purpose. A new economy that prospers in harmony with nature, but at the same time is powered by nature. This is not a contradiction, but in fact is a necessary condition in creating the so-called circular bioeconomy. Because a circular bioeconomy, above all, is about reconnecting humanity, nature, and the environment. A circular bioeconomy is about managing sustainably and holistically our biological systems in order to produce in a synergistic way food, energy, ecosystem services, bio-based solutions to decarbonize our economy while creating new jobs and economic prosperity. It is also important to highlight that above all, a circular bioeconomy should invest as a priority in biodiversity, because biodiversity is a prerequisite for life to adapt and evolve in a changing environment. And remember that a bioeconomy, bio means life, is ultimately relying on life and its biodiversity. A circular bioeconomy is also an opportunity to holistically rethink our land, food, and energy systems while transforming simultaneously many industrial sectors and the related value chains that need to become circular and climate neutral in the next 2 decades. And this is the beauty of biological systems, of biological resources, because if they are managed intelligently and sustainably, they are renewable and circular by nature. And the good news today is that with the advances of science and technology, we can now sustainably transform our forest resources, wood and non-wood, into a totally new range of bio-based solutions, low carbon solutions that can replace and environmentally outperform fossil products from sectors like construction, textiles, chemicals, medicine, transport, packaging. For instance, we can now produce a new generation of low carbon sustainable wood-based textiles that result in 6 times less carbon emissions compared to polyester. And they do not create the problem of microplastics because they are biodegradable. As we will see later on, we can also produce a new generation of wood engineering products to replace concrete and steel at a scale. Remember, concrete and steel are responsible for more than 12% of the global carbon emissions. And using wood in the building construction sector does not only reduce the carbon footprint of our cities, but de facto transform cities into carbon storage infrastructures. We will discuss this and many other wood-based solutions that are emerging. Europe has invested during the last decades heavily in forest science, technology, and the industrial development of many of these products. This explains why the European Union, while hosting only 4% of the world's forest, is responsible for more than 40% of the global forest products export value. This is substantial. Brazil, for instance, hosting 12% of the world's forest, is responsible for just 4% of the global forest products export value. Africa as a continent harvests 50% more wood than the European Union, but the export value of the products that are generated is 17 times less than that of the EU, $6 billion compared to $100 billion. The reasons behind that and why and how we can repair the situation will be addressed by my friend, Minister Lee White from Gabon, that is speaking afterwards. But with these figures, I just wanted to put you on the table some reflections about the potential for transcontinental collaboration in terms of capacity building and technology transfer, not only in making wood products more climate mitigation efficient, but adding much more value into forest-based value chains in terms of economic prosperity and jobs. This is what we are trying to do in the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance, where we have established around 20 living laboratories in 4 continents to demonstrate the potential of forest restoration and the creation of new value chains around forestry and agroforestry. My colleagues Stefan Haller and Gita Tekle are in the room and can provide you more information on the activities of the Alliance. But just to finish, James, I would like to emphasize that in the next 2 decades, we need to put forward the greatest economic transformation in human history. If you look at the speed and scale of change that we need to put forward to achieve a climate neutral, inclusive, and nature positive economy. And forestry and forest-based solutions are not just another solution, because due to their multifunctional and cross-sectorial transformational role, they should play a catalytic transformational role across sectors and connecting land to many of the value chains that we need to decarbonize. But to do that, as Ben has mentioned before, we need to work together with the different sectors, because to unlock the potential of our forests, we need to develop in-setting strategies with those sectors rather than focus on offsetting tactics. So the future is about in-setting strategies rather than offsetting tactics. And with those words, I would like to end my intervention and looking forward for an exciting event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Minister Lee White, what can you tell us, please, about the circular bioeconomy in the Gabonese context?
Thank you, James, and thank you, Mark, for that inspirational talk. I think we're talking about the second age of wood transforming our cities from concrete jungles into a huge carbon stock to fight climate change. It's inspirational. As we think about this, we look at the forests of the Congo Basin. Gabon is part of the Congo Basin. We're on the west coast of Africa on the equator. And there is no victory against climate change without keeping the Congo Basin standing. We have 8 years of global emissions locked in there, and so IPCC tells us if we lose the Congo Basin, we lose the fight against climate change. We also lose all of the ecosystem services that the Congo Basin provides, such as the rainfall that feeds into the Blue Nile that irrigates Egypt, so that link between the Congo Basin and North Africa. And we lose an incredible reservoir of biodiversity. And we're only just starting to calculate the true value of biodiversity. One of the problems we have with the biodiversity crisis, the biodiversity extinction, is we don't know how to value biodiversity the way we do carbon. In Gabon, we're faced with two major challenges as a nation over the next 10 to 15 years. The first is that traditionally we are an oil economy. We produce oil that contributes to climate change. And that economy is condemned to wither, to shrink over the coming 10, 15, 20 years because of climate change. And so for Gabon, we have when we think about climate adaptation, one of the major threats to Gabon is this economic threat. So we have to adapt. We have to replace 60% of our economy and transition from an oil-based economy to something different, hopefully something that's renewable. We also, like most African countries, have a very young population. Half of our population is under 20. And so we have to double the number of jobs in our country if we're going to maintain peace and security, if we're going to retain stability. And the good news, as we look at those two challenges, is that we are 88% covered in rainforest. We're one of the most highly forested nations on Earth. Our rainforests are highly carbon positive. They're sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere. We think we're the most carbon positive nation on Earth, absorbing about a third of France's annual carbon emissions. And the way we exploit our forests traditionally is cutting 1 to 2 trees per hectare every 25 years. And actually, over a 25-year rotation, rather than undermining the carbon stocks, we actually increase the carbon stocks of our forests through sound management. That makes us into a country today that net absorbs 100 million tons of carbon dioxide every year. And over the last decade or so, let's say since Copenhagen, we've actually increased our net carbon sequestration by a matter of about 100 million tons. And we believe strongly, we've committed, our nation has committed to a vision of sustainable development. We think that the sustainable bioeconomy is the way to face those dual challenges. The key component to that is not just sustainably harvesting the forest, so avoiding overharvest and degrading the forest. The key is making sure that we maximize the value added within our country. When we were a country exporting logs to the rest of the world, we were retaining 8% of the value of our forests. We were creating 1 job in Gabon for 9 jobs in France, in China, and in the USA. We were retaining €1 in our economy, and we were gifting €9 to the economies of France and China and the USA when we were exporting unprocessed timber. And so the key is shifting from being, it's almost the African tragedy, being a source of cheap raw materials to producing semi-finished and finished products that allow for value added. And by doing that, as you go from raw lumber to first, second, third level transformations, at each transformation, you multiply your jobs and your economy by a factor of 2 to 3. So when you get to the third level transformation, you've multiplied your economy by a factor of 10, even a factor of 10 to 20. And we believe that in that way, we can actually replace that 60% of our economy that currently comes from oil with sustainable wood products, furniture, doors, windows, parquet, and so on. We can actually make that economic transition, and we can create a sustainable economy. And as long as we manage the forests right, we can keep that going basically forever. And because timber transformation is so labor intensive, we can also create the jobs for all of those young people, particularly the peri-urban people. Gabon, 88% forest, 87% of our population is urban. People have left the rural areas into the cities, and so the biggest unemployment problem is in the cities. And so what we've done is we've created a peri-urban timber processing hub outside of Libreville, our biggest city. We're now replicating that in 3 other cities. And by bringing timber processing into a hub, I hesitate slightly as a biologist, but we're calling it a sort of an industrial ecosystem. The waste coming out of one factory is feeding into another factory, and we're getting to the point now where we're about to open Central Africa's first particle board factory. We're making activated charcoal. We've shifted from burning 70% of our wood and only using 30% of the tree to processing over 90% of the wood today in these industrial ecosystems. And so, you know, the circularity is sort of multiple. The circularity is we're no longer exporting the logs, and now we're greatly increasing the efficiency of our use of this timber, creating waste into value added, and by creating particle board, which is a cheaper form of wood, from waste, we can then start addressing the huge demand for furniture from markets like Nigeria, and so creating an economy within Central Africa and Central and West Africa. And so we really think that we have found a way to sustainably harvest, sustainably transform the forests and save those Congo Basin forests that are so important for the future of our planet by exploiting them through this bioeconomy. I strongly believe what Mark just said, that cross-laminated timber is the future of construction and the future of building our cities. And so we're starting to look at whether or not tropical timbers can compete with the pine that we tend to use in these incredible wooden buildings. And we're finding very promising results. And so as we look to the future, we're looking to exploit the forest to save the forest. We're looking to use all of these new ranges of technology to get as much value as we can out of the timber and to use the timber as efficiently as possible. And because we are a tropical country and the world tends to have a relatively negative kind of preconception about what goes on in tropical developing nations, we're very aware of the fact that we have to be able to prove through traceability and certification and so on that our timber has to be legal, it has to be sustainable, it has to be carbon positive, climate positive, it has to be biodiversity positive, and it has to be socially responsible. And if we can keep doing that, we can save the Congo Basin forests. We can keep sending water to the rainfall to the Sahel and to the Ethiopian highlands, and we can keep providing the ecosystem services that we do today to the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister White. That was terrific. Can I now invite Carlos Faropa, who's the Director for Forestry at the Ministry of Agriculture of Uruguay, to give his thoughts on sustainable bioeconomy in Uruguay. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning for all. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to show you some of our developments in Uruguay as a bioeconomy. First, we'll see the projections. As FAO defines, is the process of the knowledge-based in bioeconomy to biological resources to get good products or value-added products. So we have our resources that are crops, wood, cattle, fishery, microorganisms, and genetics. And with the bioprocesses, all academic and natural, we get these organic products, and we are in deep getting on bioeconomics materials, bioeconomics products, or and the other organic products that will be also biopharmaceutical. On the circularity, we can see the waste to get for energy, bioenergy, biomaterials, the waste also for cycling for the land and soils. Our base economy is on our soils. Second, okay, we can see where is Uruguay. There, south in South America is, so in between Brazil and Argentina, we are a small country, but our economy is a related economy, or bioeconomy is related strategy, not like let's say, dedicate as the blue ones or the more green ones, like States, Finland, Germany, that are more advanced. These are which we are applying all the scopes of the developed sustainable development of FAO or United Nations. We are supporting that areas like action for the climate, forest, hunger zero, water, clean water, and sanitation, infrastructure, and wood constructions forever, and so on. These are our forest bioeconomy. Our forest bioeconomy is created by a law in '87, and we have planted 1 million hectares of forest in these 35 years. And these forest resources are the 5% of our productive area. So we have the forest resource planted besides the native forest. We have the replacement of fossil fuels. We don't have fossil fuels, so we have to replace. We increase fixation of carbonize. We are near to be neutral, or we can be neutral production, and we are exporting, for example, meat, one of our livestock, our main products, with neutral carbon today. We are exporting with neutral carbon today. And at the end, okay, after all the products, we are making a structure of bioproducts, fibers, wood, and food. This is our strategy to advance more as a main driver, the forestry as the main driver, development towards sustainable developments and services of natural products. This is, and also complex in the considering which are the main areas in food and beverage, forest resources, of course, chemicals and pharmaceuticals, sustainable tourism, yes, aquatic biological, and recovery of waste and byproducts. That is byproducts by circular economy, clearly, no? On the other hand, we have our economy as initiatives. How we started? In 2015, we started with developing, with the planning office, a strategy for 2050. Maybe it's too long time because the changes are too much, but we developed because we were looking forward, which we see of forestry products or new forestry products. Then in 2017, we integrate the Sustainable Bioeconomy Working Group. These are 23 countries that have partnerships. In 2018, International Sustainable Bioeconomy Group, and interinstitutional, sorry, and all the ministries involved, that are the industry, that are cattle agriculture, that are environment, economy, health, labor. These are all included in the working group of bioeconomy. And in 2019, Opportunities of the Future is our wood forest roadmap. That is the line of work. This is the time of line of work. Plus, in 2021, we work on the bioeconomic strategy. I told you we were related bioeconomy strategy. We last year practice and work over governance, who is leading these projects in authorities in our country. And on the 22 this year, we're creating and starting to work on, let's say, to the World Forest Technology Center and the Bioeconomy Center, two big think tanks that are starting today. We have to think, we have to learn, so we have to think, and these are the think tanks for the win. On the other side, we have the forestry-based economy, and because we planted 1 million hectares, and so we have biomass, forest, and wood for pulp, for mechanical transformation for wood products, and engineered wood products, and new bioeconomics products, and then down all the resources coming from the pulp and the pulp production, biorefineries, and also bark and other thinnings coming from the forest, uses for electrical, bioenergy, electrical, and heating energy. I would say that Uruguay is 100% renewable electrical energy today by wind, water, biomass, and solar, and 40% of the heating energy is by biomass. And 14% is biomass and electrical energy. On the other side, sorry if I go route, but I have short time, I go quick, I'm sorry. This is the native forest. In the 1968, a very wise think tank of persons thought about the contribution of our native forests, and so we are thinking, we are using as timber, as non-timber, but in a sustainable way, and also using for cattle breeding the forest. The 1968 was a law that paid environmental service by taking care of the forest, but taking taxation, so taking out the taxes. So if you think more than 50 years ago, it was a view of long term. How are the challenges today for finalizing? Okay, formalizing of the government mechanism for sustainable preparation, action plan for 2025, bioeconomy monitoring and evaluation from FAO, ICA, and CEPAL. It's not CELAC, it's CEPAL. And development of Wood Forest Technological Center and Bioeconomical Center, that is this year that we are going to do. And also challenges more important are development consensual regional vision of the bioeconomy serves as reference framework and to guide development in regional thinking, regional view, South American view, unless south of South American view. And on the other hand, count on international and intra-regional cooperation that's to develop more our bioeconomy, in particular by facilitating, supporting the regional and technical financial cooperation. Uruguay has a state case, was a study case by IEECI for the methodology of measuring how was the bioeconomy inside our economy. And that is, bioeconomy is 46% inside our products and goods, and 14% of GDP, 14.6 of our GDP today. Thank you, and that's all.
Thank you very much indeed, Carlos. We're now going to hear we're going to hear and see a video intervention from Virginia Puzzolo, who's the head of program at the Circular Bio-Based Europe joint undertaking. I think she's going to tell us about how the European Commission is engaged in the circular bioeconomy agenda.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Virginia Puzzolo. I'm the head of program in the Circular Bio-Based Europe joint undertaking. I cannot be with you physically in Seoul, but I'm happy to be at least here directly from Brussels to present some of the lessons learned that we have accumulated during the many years of work in bioeconomy in the forestry sector, and as well to share with you some recommendations and ideas to stimulate the discussion of this morning. So I would like to start with where we come from. The first things I like to highlight is in fact that in 2012, the first European bioeconomy strategy has been presented and was the base for the establishment of the first bio-based industry joint undertaking, which is our predecessor. And the aim and the activity that we are fostering at European level in the context of bioeconomy are strongly linked with the priorities that have been set by the European Commission with the European Green Deal, and with the specific and ambitious climate objective that we would like to attain in Europe for the benefit of all of us. To shift from fossil fuel types of material, raw material, and move to instead a biomass-based type of raw material, we still need investment. And this is why public and private need to come together to try to make the change. To achieve this very ambitious target, the European Union have decided to invest specifically in the Circular Bio-Based Europe joint undertaking, which is a public-private partnership between the Union, the European Union, that is represented by the European Commission, and a consortium of private entities that is called the Bio-Based Industry Consortium, BIC, to identify, recall the three main objectives that we have set for our partnership, which I believe are relevant for many other initiatives that will be discussed today in the conference. We believe that we should continue to invest to accelerate innovation, to ensure that the bio-based innovative solution can reach the market. And to accelerate the market deployment, we need, for those solutions that are already mature, we need to de-risk the investment and to allow the companies, both large and small and medium enterprise, to become attractive for investors. But as well, we think that it's essential we focus more and more on environmental performance of the bio-based industrial system that are going to be deployed. And this will be a specific focus of attention in the new partnership. I like to give you some peel of elements of discussion that you could foster in the workshop today. So one element is that in our project, the project we have funded up to 9 now that are based on forest-based biomass, I think it's interesting to underline that 96% of the feedstock that comes from forest feedstock is mainly based on wood residues, cellulose, and side streams from pulp and paper industry. So you understand that this is an added value for already well-established sectors in the forestry domain, which can further get an additional income and additional interest from an economic point of view. So we also strongly believe that among the different benefits that the bioeconomy can produce in the forestry sector is the maximization, in fact, of the use of wood, but as well the increase of the value in support of sustainable forest management. And again, if we look especially at the Baltic and Scandinavian countries in Europe, we have a lot of good examples and best practice that we can share. And among the sector that can benefit, of course, from this type of products, the construction sector is probably one of the ones that can be most affected positively and could contribute in building up and support the environmental sustainability that we have to foster. Looking more generally at what could be benefit and why we believe we still need to continue to invest in bioeconomy, especially in the forestry sector, and so on forest biomass is naturally linked to the multifunctional role of the forest, because forests put together socio-economical, environmental and climate aspect in a quite harmonious way. But as well because we think that forestry role is essential for the low circular economy and the decarbonization that we need to achieve. So forest industry, in fact, can reduce significantly the footprint of the material that is produced and increase material efficiency. So where we are going to continue and further we will invest is indeed on reusing, recycling, try to maximize the use of residual, and in this way, in fact, and the example is, for example, from the paper and the paper packaging, the possibility, in fact, to strengthen this sector further as well. One last element that I think is interesting as well in terms of priority that can be put forward is that we will continue to focus on investing on innovative products, and specifically the shift from short to long-lived use of wood and the recyclability of wood in value-added products. On the public-private side, so what can be some lessons learned, some recommendations and ideas that we can share with you is the importance of the balancing of public versus private investment, but as well the need of clearly define what are the common technological and economic objectives, and agree together on what can be the performance indicator to be used to ensure that these objectives are attained in the lifetime of the program that is established. We believe in the value chain, and we think that in fact it's important that everyone that has a role to play in ensuring that the innovation developed can really be deployed to market are involved from the early stage in an integrated approach. And of course, what we see as the major value is in fact the attractiveness, the leverage effect, what we call, of public funding on private investment. And with these words, I thank you a lot for your attention, and I wish you a very nice discussion in the workshop.
Great. Okay, well, I think that's a very good start to our session. Will you join me in thanking Sven, Minister White, Carlos, and remotely Mark Palahi, and then can I call, as they leave the stage, our first panel proper to replace them. Thank you. Thank you. So here we have Jane Maloney. Hi again, Jane, who's the Executive Director of South African Paper Manufacturers, of the South African Paper Manufacturers Association. We're going to be joined virtually by Doris Wang, who's the General Manager of Bamkin, a bamboo company. And here we have also Stefan Allaire, who's the CEO and founder of Reforest Action. Jane, kick us off, please. We often talk about the 4 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, recover. Can you give us some concrete examples of innovative technologies that are speaking to those 4 R's?
Maybe of start again. Perhaps not so much innovative technologies, but innovative policies.
Okay.
I did tell Sven that when it comes to the 4 R's, reducing, we do reduce the use of paper by writing on both sides, but the innovation side is further down the line. So, yeah. So in South Africa, we have extended producer responsibility, and that is a policy that you tend to think of being in the first world, in Europe, but we are in the process of implementing it, and it is enormously exciting. We have negotiated with our government, and the message that I want to give to everybody today is one that we heard in the previous speaker, talking about working with your government. Because since 2011, we worked on an industry waste management plan. And then the government wanted to actually implement a tax. Now, a tax in our country well, sorry, perhaps I shouldn't say that, but taxes, the private sector likes to avoid taxes. We don't have control over what happens to our taxes. So instead of a tax that goes to a waste management bureau, we now have made the decision to have an extended producer responsibility fee. Industry takes responsibility for collecting that fee, James, and then it means that we can make the most of that fee. We can put that fee to reducing, recycling, reusing. And even further than that, we can go to innovation. If you think about the paper sector, we have waste that is sludge. And we learned recently from a professor in Graz that actually the fibers can be recycled up to 25 times, although some of the manufacturers will tell you nonsense. But you always need new fiber to come into that circle. And what we are doing is research on the sludge so that we can utilize that sludge when we actually plant trees. And that way you truly do have a full circular economy. So that's just some of the things, James.
Thank you very much indeed, Jane. We're going to move quite swiftly on. With apologies, Jane, I'd like to have stayed with you just because we have run a little bit behind schedule. Let's hear, please, from Doris Wang, joining us from China, I believe. Can we see her on the screen? Hello, Doris.
Hi, everybody.
Your company makes bamboo products for international markets. I wonder if you can tell us how you ensure the sustainability of those products and perhaps something on the circularity of your products too, how they feed into a circular system.
Okay. Firstly, I'm glad to give a small talk. And one of the most important characteristics of bamboo is its sustainability. So bamboo roots differ with wood in the form of a bamboo rhizome. A bamboo rhizome can grow many bamboos. So when we cut down the bamboo every year, it will not destroy the root system. And on the contrary, rational cutting is benefit to the growth of new bamboo every year. So sustainability is a built-in feature of bamboo products itself. And secondly, about the circularity of the production processes. Take an example of our case. We are producing bamboo housewares and furniture. Like here, you can see a little bit. So every day we will have about 10 tons of bamboo scrap materials, which are wastes. We use these waste materials to making bamboo charcoals. And through the process of making bamboo charcoals, it will generate plenty of heat, which we can supply back the heat energy to our production line and the daily operation of the factory. And this whole energy circular forms a green closed loop inside the factory. We call this kind of zero waste output production lines as eco-factory. Therefore, this is the way how we ensure the sustainability and the circularity of the production process. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Doris, again, I'd like to stay with you, but we've run so behind that I need to keep moving on. So may I thank you very much for that interesting explanation. And I turn to Stéphane Allaire of Reforest Action. Stéphane, can you tell us very briefly about Reforest Action's ambition, what it is that you do? And then can you tell us how forest restoration contributes to the circular economy?
Yeah, thank you very much. Reforest Action is a private sector company dedicated to restoring forest and supporting agroforestry projects. We've been doing that for 12 years. We have 1,200 projects in 42 countries. Our goal, our objective is to make circular bioeconomy mainstream for a number of reasons. My friend Mark Balahi reminded us how compulsory it is. It's the right exit for today's world to make circular bioeconomy mainstream. And the way we do that is we support regenerative landscapes and create a generation of bioeconomy entrepreneurs. So regenerative landscapes are landscapes that act positively on climate and on biodiversity. And we make sure that we restore land, forest especially. We restore land and we monitor the impact over time. And we help creating a generation of bioeconomy entrepreneurs where we train people who create their own job, who will create sustainable value chains, off-takers, to make sure that the product they process come from biodiversity, but also in a sustainable way. And we have a number of examples. We are in charge of implementing the living labs of the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance with Mark Palahi and Yita in the room. And we have a number of living labs in different countries. And for instance, very rapidly, we've got a very beautiful project in Nigeria where we work with an off-taker working on cashew nuts, where we help him scaling his value chain while restoring the landscape in the village nearby. We have also a living lab in India, which is dedicated to the fashion industry, where they produce cotton, silk, and cashmere in a sustainable way. So through different living labs examples, we make sure that we can showcase what the circular bioeconomy can be worldwide, because it's not a vision, the circular bioeconomy. It happens today, and it needs to be spread. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Stefan. I'd like to ask the same question to all three of you, if Doris Wang is still with us. I hope she is.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you, Doris. What do you need in terms of public policy to really accelerate the progress you're making on this agenda? How short of public support are you?
For our case, I think if we have a business model that combines the benefits for both private and the public sector globally, will speed up the transition to a sustainable bioeconomy. In private sector, policy support from the government and international organizations are required because the influence of private sector, as we know, was limited. We also need the international community to jointly promote the advantages of forest products. Thus, will accelerate to achieve carbon neutrality as soon as possible. We also need to expand the productivity of forest sustainable products, and effective development and utilization of forest products in accordance with local conditions are also significant. And moreover, transition into a sustainable circular bioeconomy from fossil-based economy while reducing poverty globally is also an important task we need to solve in the future, and especially the underdeveloped countries. Because take an example as us, like where the bamboo forest grows are mostly at the less developed countries and the areas, I mean.
Thank you very much.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Doris. Thank you very much, especially for joining us remotely. Jane, same question to you. I saw you winced when I asked the question. So,
No.
So be frank.
Okay, no. You need an enabling environment. Governments must govern, and they must let businesses do business. They mustn't meddle. They must enable business to do their business as efficiently and effectively as possible. And then they must enforce.
So are you saying that you have all the incentives, you have all the supportive public policy that you need, you just need to be left alone, or is there more that you actually need to make the economics of this work?
I think that we do have the incentives. There's an incentive to actually get on and do the business, to recycle. The paper industry is a capital-intensive industry. They've invested a huge amount into ensuring that there is a market for waste paper. So in our situation, that exists. So they need to leave us alone. Just enable, an enabling environment.
Thank you. Stefan?
I think we need two things. We need science, and thank you for all your contribution, dear scientists in the room, for what you provide, because we use it quite a lot, and we need the market conditions. Private sector is good at implementing, but we need the market conditions, we need the laws, we need the constraints as well, so we can innovate within boundaries and implement it.
What do you mean by constraints?
Rules, really. What can we do, what we cannot do? I think this is very important. Freedom is great, especially when you have boundaries in which you can innovate.
Very good. We have about 5 minutes for questions, if there are any. Do we have any questions for our 3 private sector representatives here? Yes, lady at the back.
Hello. Hi, my name is Hyunju Ryu. I'm a consultant working for BNZ Partners. We consult corporates who are looking for renewables, so to meet their net zero strategies. And I was wondering, because like when I consult with the clients, in their strategies, bioeconomy or bioenergy is not really on the list of their options. So I'm really looking if there are any business cases that like corporates chose bioenergy over solar or wind energy, and what were the motivations for them to choose them. And the second question is, in my personal opinion, bioenergy, especially if it's from the circular way of production, it's more sustainable than solar or wind power, because if you consider the lifespan of the facilities of those and how much involves the heavy mining from the process of making those. So I was wondering what's hindering the growth of this bioenergy market.
Thank you very much for your questions. Doris Wang, do you want to have a go at that?
Hi.
Did you
sorry,
get the question?
Because of the internet connection, so I'm late for the question.
No problem. Well, the question was really, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to simplify, there was a lady in the audience who was pushing bioenergy and wondering and making a strong case for bioenergy over other sorts of renewables, and wondering what impediments there were to developing a bigger bioenergy industry. I think that was really the question, was it? Mm-hmm. I just wonder, from your own experience, because you actually use bioenergy in your own processes, whether you had any reflections on the potential of bioenergy or the impediments, the obstacles to growing a bigger bioenergy industry.
Yeah, because we use the waste what we in the production line, and we use the waste to produce the bioenergy, and then use the energy to make bamboo charcoal. It could be another product which we produced from our waste, and also we can use during this energy producing line. It also generates a lot of heat. And as I said, we use this kind of energy to supply back to our production line. So we create a eco factory, and we also copy this kind of way to use the eco fuels in different areas and in different different industries. They just purchase our wastes and our bamboo charcoals to get the energy and use in their the daily production in their their factory. So I guess this will be a huge amount of market to develop in the future.
Thank you very much, Doris. I think she's in agreement with you. Do we have one more question? Gentleman here.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Adafrus, from Ethiopia. Very briefly, when I try to read the concept of this circular bioeconomy, I see that value addition, particularly in the forest sector, is going to be one of the most important pillars, so that people, for instance, engage or assign part of their resource, land, and so on to plant trees, manage forests, and sustainably use it rather than destroying it as they do it now, for instance, in Ethiopia. But when we think of value addition, I wanted to challenge those guys who are really behind this idea of bioeconomy. If the world is really going to support that, let me support my argument by an example. Sudan, one of, used to be, for a long time, the lead export of gum arabic, yeah, the Sudan. Sudan wanted to add value to the raw materials, and they started, to grind and export not a raw that they used to do for 100 years. But it is all of a sudden that the European market has abandoned the import of gum arabic from Sudan, so that Sudan is now not known for the export of gum arabic. Ethiopia, as an ancient country, exporting frankincense, myrrh, or popanax to the global market, wanted to add value to this product, but we are afraid that we might lose our market niche in Europe if we add value to this product.
I'm going to ask you to finish, because I think you're making an interesting statement, but it is a statement.
Yes, yes. So if we go for this very interesting, circular bioeconomy, which also need to be supported by value addition, do you really think that the global market is going to support, particularly the producers' countries who wanted to add a little bit of value to their raw materials? Thank you for that.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't know if we really have... Stefan, yes, we have some expertise.
Yeah, I'd like to react, because thank you very much for reminding us the reality of things. And we live in a very complex world, and our approach on this topic is to start with the off-taker, with the final consumer. If we don't have a value chain well identified, it's difficult to start, because you put a huge bet on setting up a value chain, but if you don't know to whom you will sell it, you will sell your products, well, good luck. So we have an approach with the way we start from the person who will buy the product. We make sure that they define their expectations, technical expectations, and then we build the value chain according to these expectations. And one thing I think we haven't mentioned so far, which is extremely important for circular bioeconomy to be sustainable, it's sobriety. So, is it English? Sobriety? Sobriété in French? Sobriety? I don't think without sobriety we can make circular bioeconomy sustainable.
Without sobriety, we can't get much done, to be honest.
Yeah, so, and even in today's world, actually, with today's economy. But yeah, I wanted to highlight this before we close this session.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Let's close the session with thanks to our excellent three panelists, Doris Wang in China, Stefan and James. And could I ask our next panel to come to the stage, please? Very, very good. And so we have, hopefully, in order, nearest to me and then going down, Mr. Gies Berkink, who's a senior advisor on responsible forestry at WWF, Jim Chamberlain from USDA and the International Union of Forest Research Organizations, task force on the contributions of non-wood forest products to the bioeconomy, Sandra Afonso, who's a researcher from the Brazilian Forest Service, Jörg Schweinle, who's the head of Sustainability Assessment Department at the Thurnin Institute of Forestry, and Mokena Makeka, who's Dalberg advisor and board member of the South Africa Green Building Council and involved in that wonderful video that we saw to begin with. Gijs, welcome. Can you tell us, please, how the forest private sector can promote this transition towards a bioeconomy that's inclusive, that doesn't take advantage of, but in fact encourages the participation of local communities at its heart?
Yeah, let me start maybe with providing some examples where we see the demonstration that well-managed forest and plantations in the right places, which is important, can have significant ecological value whilst also supporting local community development, improving incomes and creating opportunities for smallholders. We as WWF are engaging with the forest sector through, amongst others, platforms such as Forest Forward and New Generation Plantation. Collectively, our participants are managing around 15 million hectares of land, which consist of managed natural forest and productive plantations, about 2/3 of those, and the rest is restored forest, wetlands and other habitats, but also agricultural land that is often managed by local communities. In Brazil's Atlantic forest, for example, some 2 million hectares of former cattle pastures have been transformed into mosaic landscapes that combine stands of intensively managed eucalypt along with restored native rainforest. In Chile, following the devastating forest fires of 2017, natural forest and plantations are being sensitively restored to strengthen landscape and socio-economic resilience. In Asia and Africa, agroforestry schemes that combine trees and crops are improving soil and farmer incomes. In Gabon, we're working with, in countries such as Gabon, but also Republic of Congo and elsewhere, we're working with natural forest concessionaires, focusing on the integration of improving forest management with emission reduction protocols and validating, evaluating biodiversity protection and enhancement. To come more to the point in terms of how can the private sector really empower local communities, one important element which we've heard already a few times is local value addition, to create jobs, but I think also to focus more on local market development. Markets are changing and shifting, local markets are developing. One thing that we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, it highlights the fragility of global supply chain, which is also reinforcing the need for sustainable indigenous people and local community forest management. Maybe lastly, we need to, in order to facilitate this transition, also bringing aboard local communities, indigenous people, we need to truly embrace and capitalize on the multifunctionality of our forests. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Gijs. James Chamberlain, can you tell us something about non-wood products, forest products, and their contribution to the circular bioeconomy?
Sure. Can you hear me all right? I can answer that in 2 words: food and medicine. But let me expand on that. Billions of people around the world consume directly products that are harvested from the forest for food and medicine. They depend on their lives and their sustenance for collecting food and medicine from the forest. They indirectly consume by generating income from those products that they're selling. So they're out gathering products in the forest and they're selling them in local markets. Many of those products get into global markets. Think acai, for example, that's harvested from the forests of the Guyana Shield countries that start with indigenous people that are harvesting these fruits from the forest, they're processing them, and then they end up in the global market in our health food stores that we go to every single day. So these people are marginalized. They're typically women, indigenous folks, and by integrating these products into bioeconomy, we can achieve 3 basic goals, actually 4. One would be an upliftment of these people and their livelihoods. 2 would be a conservation of biodiversity. And I say that, but you have to realize that harvesting may have an ecological impact. So we really need to understand how to sustainably manage those forests for those products. Three, we can expand the forest sector beyond what we typically think about today. And what we've heard in the last few days is the forest sector is trees and wood. But in fact, the forest sector, if we look beyond this, these typical products, includes pharmaceuticals. It includes the food industry. It includes the global wellness industry, where we're all trying to eat better and eat more nutritional food. Thanks.
Thanks very much indeed, James. Sandra Afonso, so James Chamberlain spoke about the potential to uplift poor communities through these non-wood forest products, getting them to market. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, perhaps with some specific examples from Brazil?
Em primeiro lugar, me gostaria de agradecer à organização.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this session. And thank you very much for that question. Non-wood forest products are important in Brazil, and I would like to talk about some examples. In the case of Brazil, we are a very multicultural society. And there are many different communities from different cultural backgrounds that coexist. And there are various indigenous groups in Brazil. And in these local communities, they utilize non-wood forest products to sustain their livelihoods. Açaí is a product that you may have heard of. It is produced by Amazonians primarily, but now this product is being consumed across the world. And carioca is another product that is used. And in the central place in Brazil, this carioca is used, but also it's used across the nation. As these non-wood forest products become commercialized, local communities were able to develop further. And the value chains are emerging based on these non-wood forest products. And there are many unions or cooperatives that are being formed in the local communities around these products. And in order to improve the livelihood of the local communities, we need to foster the trading in these non-wood forest products. But in order to achieve this, much innovation is needed, and especially in terms of valuation of these products. And also in innovation in the value chain is important. First, we need to have enough recognition of the value of the non-wood forest products, but this is an area that we don't have enough of in Brazil. And there is a region called Babaçu in Brazil. If we look at the situation in Babaçu, cacao products that are produced in Babaçu have not been properly registered. And there are women who produce these products, but their contributions have not been recognized and rewarded properly. And we need to create
added value, but we don't have an organized approach to create added value for these products. Right now, in the respective local communities, they are forming cooperatives in order to foster commercialization of their products. Since 2009, in order to promote the biodiversity, we have been implementing a plan, and government has provided subsidies for the implementation of this plan. And we're also working to foster fairer trade. And in order to produce non-wood forest products, there are subsidies being provided to foster trade in these goods. An important concept is socio-biological diversity, and we need society's engagement to foster this diversity. All products that are based on biological resources are being produced by traditional indigenous local communities. In 2019, the concept of bioeconomy was introduced in Brazil. Despite that, in Brazil, the concept of bioeconomy has not been really implemented. So there is a lot more to do in order to have this realized. 2 weeks from now, bioforestry conference will be organized, and I would like to invite you all to this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sandra. That was very good. If we want to promote this bioeconomy, we obviously need to be able to measure it, know what we're measuring, and then monitor that change. Jörg Schweine, this is something that you've been engaged in both Uruguay and Germany, I understand. I wonder if you could just tell us a bit more about that process. How good are we at measuring and monitoring the bioeconomy?
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, so we have been asked by the German Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food and Agriculture to come up with a first stock taking on bioeconomy in Germany, and then further on the line, we have been asked to support on behalf, in cooperation with FAO and the ministry, Uruguayan Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture and Fishery, to do the same in Uruguay. So despite the fact that the countries are quite different, one can say that we can come up with some recommendations or some basic results one can make. That's 4. So if you have a bioeconomy strategy in place, you might have defined some goals you want to reach with bioeconomy in a certain period of time. And that's good if you have that. And that, of course, it would be good to have some benchmarks. So what would you like to achieve within 10 years or 20 years in certain areas of your bioeconomy, depending on how you define that in your country context? And based on that, then we can start off with a monitoring concept. But of course, we also need clear monitoring goals. And based on those monitoring goals, we then can build a consistent monitoring concept. The problem is, however, that our statistical systems are currently not quite designed to cover bioeconomy. So they are designed in the classical sectors, but the bio part of it, you have to sort of, look where it is and try to quantify that. So what is needed is really an integration into our statistical frameworks that are currently exist. And fourth, and finally, that's cooperation and dialogue. So you have all the players of bioeconomy in your countries in place, and you have to make them discuss and trying to sort out the direction you want to go. And that's a good example that already Mr. Faropa mentioned. They had in Uruguay they called it Mesa Chica, so the children's table where everyone sit together and discusses on how things should go. So that's also key, communication and dialogue.
Thanks very much indeed for that. Yeah, Makena Makeka, forgive me. That's okay. Africa sort of gets, until very recently, has gone missing from the climate debate. It just hasn't been considered, despite the fact that Africa is going to produce most of the population growth and a large part of the urbanization that the world will see in the next 3 years. Therefore, where Africa goes in terms of energy development, resource use, and indeed circularity is absolutely central to the world's struggle with climate change. Could not be more important. I wonder if you could tell us, in that broad context, just the underappreciated massive centrality of Africa, what the potential is for wood to be used in African construction, central to that huge urbanization that Africa is going to see.
Absolutely. Well, first I'd like to start in Europe and say that in 2019, probably most of us watched Chartres Cathedral burn down. This was a building that had sequestered carbon from the year 1128, and the wood there had been sourced in forest there from timber that was almost 200 years old. And it was a stunning example of the role that architecture can play in terms of keeping carbon locked in place. But what's also important about that particular experience, or project, if you will, is that when Chartres Cathedral was being built in the year 1128, it was the architect, the forester, and the cleric who went out into the forest to actually source the specific timbers used for that structure. So there was a relationship between forestry and construction. To my colleague's point, if we think of Africa, and we can actually start with the Congo Basin, whose population is expected to double by 2050, the bulk of the world's growth between now and 2050 will be in the global south. These are the cities of the future, and we're faced with a very particular dilemma. Will these cities be constructed out of concrete and steel and make the mistakes of the last century? Or will they become the bioeconomy cities of the future, which begins to bring in the sort of circularity and synergy between nature and construction, which is possible? These future generations will demand what we call climate-smart livelihoods. They'll require jobs, food security, access to good transport, access to, let's say, climate-smart energy. And it's critical for us to see forests and cities as almost inseparable for the future of humanity. So the old distinctions of saying there's forests and urban, on the other hand, seeing them as opposed to each other, has to fall away. In order to do this, we have to increase the value of forests. And you increase the value of forests by a number of means, but one of them is by creating demand for forest products across the whole bioeconomic spectrum. In particular, architecture has a huge role to play because not only does it sequester carbon, but if we can begin to pivot our buildings and say, let's say 50% of our buildings are now made out of timber or wood products, or 70. The one that I showed, or that was shown rather earlier today, was at 85%, an 85% reduction between typical concrete and steel. It's still a work in progress, it's still theoretical. But even if we make a 50% change in terms of our construction profile, and we think of the demographic change that we're encountering between now and 2050, we can make a serious dent in terms of climate change. But we do need to mainstream data. There are perceptions that tropical woods are not good for construction. This is not the case. We also need to mainstream the understanding that logging is against biodiversity. Again, this is not necessarily the case. Selective logging has shown that in some instances, biodiversity can actually increase. So the notion that Africa's forests have to be kept as some sort of reservation or conservatory for the world and not be developed is actually false. On the contrary, we have to think very carefully about what does a forest economy look like that is appropriate to the African context. So we have to mainstream development in a positive way. We also have to mainstream the conception of new generation plantations. We have to move away from monoculture and say, how can we create biodiverse landscapes which are giving us the wood, the pulp, the resources in order to supply the demand that is inevitable between now and 2050. So how can we create a transition where we have mosaic landscapes and urban forests, or cities which in themselves are seen as part of the forest continuum? And last but not least, there's a question of beneficiation, which has been discussed by my colleagues, second and third tier. So what is the sort of equipment that will be required on the African continent to move from basic logging towards CLT, LVL, and some of the higher-end products? What is the sort of human capital delta, if you will, that's required in terms of our education, our standards, and our regulations with regards to construction? Many of the things that I mentioned, by the way, are not in the future. They're happening as we speak. So the future is now. I just wanted to be very, very clear that I'm not talking in the abstract. There are lots of efforts on the continent in this direction, of which Gabon is one of a number of champions. But I also want to talk about the impact on gender, because there's a fascinating opportunity through using wood in construction which can allow more gender participation in the construction sector, which is currently male-dominated. It also allows an opportunity for youth entrepreneurship to participate in the creation of their cities and also in jobs and livelihoods. But last but not least, and noticing that I'm coming up to 20 seconds, I want to talk about the aesthetic and what I call the psychosocial dimension of wood. Studies have shown that people who learn in wood spaces, who read in wood-oriented spaces, actually absorb information far better. There's a reason why libraries tend to have a certain aesthetic. There's a reason why our law courts tend to have this material. Wood has an innate connection to our humanity. So there's a fantastic opportunity to rediscover not only our connection with the planet, but to also to become better human beings. And I believe that wood is a key part of the circular bioeconomy. In short, my colleagues, the world needs a bioeconomy Marshall Plan, and we need to grow our cities and no longer build our cities. A new mindset is required. I thank you.
Thanks, McKenna. Staying with you if I can. We're envisaging urbanization on just an enormous scale in Africa. And it's happening, right? When I spent a lot of time in Kinshasa 20 years ago, it was a city of 7 million people. Now it's a city of 17 million people. By 2050, it's going to be a city of 30 million people. So my question to you is really around cost. We know that this is a beautiful future where you have wood used in all kinds of imaginative, high-tech fashion to compensate in ways that we could previously not have imagined for concrete and other modern building materials and methods. But is it actually imaginable that you could be building with wood at that kind of scale, at the scale that Africa is going to be building in materials of some kind, given the cost differentials that exist currently, or will there not be such cost differential in future?
I think cost is an issue, but that's why I made the point about the importance of plantations and reimagining what's required. I think countries that even think that they probably have an abundance of forest resources have to think very carefully about what are the resources that are being put forward to support this construction boom. So I think that there should be substantive investment in new forms of landscape management to create that sort of opportunity. I think in the interim, obviously it takes a while for these plantations to mature. We do want to avoid, importing wood halfway around the world into Africa to say we're making our wooden cities. But at the same time, there's also the hidden costs of concrete and steel and a whole range of other lack of bioeconomic opportunities. If I think of wood, for example, let's take a wood artisan. A wood artisan may be involved in a building, but those skills can allow them to make furniture and possibly transition into making other sorts of products. A concrete mixer basically there's not much else that they can do with those particular skills. Yes, there's concrete furniture that's out there, but the reality is that wood allows us to have a leapfrog and a step change in other parts of the economy. So the cost of, let's say, moving towards a wood-based urbanism, I think is offset by the ecosystem impacts, job creation, etc., paper, and all the other range of products that wood can begin to produce. So if we look at it in isolation, I think it's challenging. If we see wood as part of a bioeconomic strategy for development, I think it's a far superior choice than concrete or steel, and that means that we have to deal with it in some fashion or other.
Okay, thank you very much, Morgana. Thank you, everybody. Do we have some questions? I think we have about 10 minutes. Yes, lady here.
Thank you for a very nice, interesting discussion. But Marina Elbakidze, I'm from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, but I'm Georgian Ukrainian Swedish researcher. And this, my origin will motivate a question. I want to bring us a little bit back to reality. And we know that it's ongoing war in Ukraine. And there were many wars in Europe, globally also. My question is, do you have any rough estimation how ongoing war in Europe will affect bioeconomies or all our efforts to develop bioeconomy at the national level, globally? And also, I mean, this question is important because we cannot ignore what is going on in Europe because we are very close to the nuclear war. Nobody could say that it will not happen. We don't know what will happen. And therefore, I really want that it would be reflected somehow in the final statement of the World Forestry Congress, because just to ignore it, it's not right. We have to talk about it, we have to understand what is going on, and to understand the consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to respond to that, okay? Sure.
In part. And I'm not sure if I'll fully answer your question, but certainly our concerns as Africans has been around food security and grain supplies, particularly towards many countries in terms of Northern Africa. But we're also seeing knock-on effects because some of those grains are also used in terms of supporting cattle and other sort of, other sorts of products. So I think that the big challenge for us is probably a surge in food prices until the middle of 2023. But it also triggers conversations about having more resilience at a local level with regards to grain production. And also it's triggered some conversations about alternative energy supply. Not sure that that fully answers your question, but to say that yes, Africa, I know of many African countries that are affected in terms of their own supply chains and livelihoods, particularly when it comes to grains.
I mean, the question really is about resource use in and energy production in Europe. Do you want to say something about that, Jörg? It looks as if you were gesturing towards that.
Yeah, I mean, we have also already in place, I think, embargoes for wood imports into the European Union from Russia. Yeah. So, of course, it has consequences. There will be disruptions of wood supply, for example. There might not be as severe as the disruptions in food, because Ukraine, as you all know, and Russia are the largest producers of wheat. Yes, there will be disruptions, quite frankly.
If I may interject, having spent time in Ukraine, in Western Ukraine, and trying to understand the micro enterprises that are producing non-timber forest products, it's going to change the pressure on the populations and the small businesses that are producing non-timber forest products. I think of birch sap, wild onions, and other products that are coming out of Western Ukraine and going into the international markets. And it's certainly going to change that and impact small enterprises that are on the margins of the economy.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. Do we have some more questions? Gentleman there.
Muchas gracias. Mi nombre es Antonio Micha Ondo. Yo soy director general de INCOMA, que formo parte de la delegación.
Hello. I'm from Guinea. I have a concern that I would like to talk about. And with regards to, I'd like to share my concern about using wood in African construction. Africa is a very humid region. So, for example, humidity level is 70 to 80%, and even at minimum, 30% or 40%. So in such environment, wood material-based construction needs to be made sustainable by certain innovative technologies. So what sort of technologies would they be? And what would be the cost implications of using such technologies? Because we need to take into account the cost of maintaining such wooden structures in very humid environments. So wooden constructions, after about 10 years, there is significant damage. There's a lot of pests that cause damages to such structures. So the local communities need to come to a solution.
Well, first of all, I'd like to clarify that the African continent has a range of different temperature and humidity conditions. So there's tropical conditions, there's coastal conditions, there's conditions in the north and the south. So there's no way across 54 countries that you would have a singular solution for a particular type of species of wood. That's the first thing. The second one is, in terms of your point about humidity, I think it's a valid thing to be concerned about. I'm doing research with organizations in Singapore who also have similar high humidity conditions and so on. And we've done a lot of research about understanding the different types of woods and how they react in those circumstances. So there is research that exists. In fact, I know of at least 12 species of woods that are very, very compliant. But in terms of the treatments, and I don't want to bore this audience with technical stuff, but there's vacuum treatment, there's a whole range of ways of actually desiccating the wood so that it has a stable profile when it comes to water and so on. And I think the third piece to say is that there are examples on the continent of wood being, whether it's in Egypt or Sudan, elsewhere, being hundreds of years old. So the idea that wood can only last for 10 years, it's really a question of how it was used, how it was displayed, and how it was designed. I think that the question is about what is the sort of research that is required in specific locations in order to ensure that wood can be appropriately deployed. And I can tell you with comfort, a solution for the Congo Basin would be different to East Africa, would be different to Libya, would be different from South Africa or Mozambique. The point is understanding that there's solutions that are specific to context that do exist.
Great, thanks very much for the question. Thanks, Makena. Do we have another question or two? Yes, gentleman there.
Thank you very much. I'm Fujiwara from the Wood Miles Forum from Japan. Thank you very much. Very good, positive dialogue. And when we talk about the bioeconomy, there is, compared with the fossil economy, there is a difference between that in bioeconomy, the supply chain makes, in some place, the small-scale producer is introduced commercially, including the most upstream raw material production process. There are many small-scale producer is in, and that is a positive side, but there are some negative problem because that it is very difficult to control the social or environmental risk. So I would like to ask that sorry, very big.
What exactly is the question? I haven't quite.
Question: how to control those small-scale producers? And my idea is that local economy, local production and consuming local wood, that kind of concept is very important. How do you think about that?
Sandra, Alfonso, can you have a go at that?
Sim, eu penso que
Yes. In my view, food security is very important. Regarding non-wood forest products, I believe food security is particularly important. The local community that live and reside in forests, managing these local communities is very important in relation to your questions. So the local community must provide support for forest management.
I also want to have a go at that. I feel we could give them a fuller answer.
I think you've really highlighted a very valuable part of the bioeconomy. When you think that 80% of production of non-wood forest products are coming through informal markets, and a large portion of the production is small-scale producers, it really provides lots of challenges to figure out how to support those small and micro enterprises, but it also provides lots of opportunities to uplift those people, those small enterprises, and those those small jobs and businesses that are really the foundation of the economy of many of these nations and these countries. So it's not a simple solution of saying, well, we can work with large corporate entities, but somehow we need to figure out how to get to those really small-scale businesses and the artisans and the entrepreneurs that are really providing the foundational source for those economies. It's not simple.
Heath, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, indeed, it's a very complex problem. It's a highly fragmented sector of sorts. I think there are a number of ways we can approach to try to address that issue. I think on the first hand, when you're talking upstream, so the forests that are being managed locally, it's important to focus on setting up accountable community structures, which are often missing, which would lead to better negotiation positions for those local entities. And I think when we're talking about these very compartmentalized supply chains, another approach would be to work upstream, focusing on the transparency of the supply chains these products end up in. Get potential large corporates or others that are really at the end of the supply chain to commit to putting efforts into place to have more transparency in the supply chain, and through that have also then sustainability principles trickle down to those smaller artisanal producers that are in between.
Great, thanks very much, Heath. We can take one more question if there is one. Gentleman there.
Hello, my name is Dani. I'm from Cambodia. My question is how we can create the resource for circular bioeconomy from the forestry. It's a kind of first of my part of my question. Like we have discussed with the other fora that the planting a tree, it requires a time and investment. And if we look at the global landmass, only more than 65% is a kind of urban or not forest area. But the agroforestry, we can do that in the urban setting, planting the tree in the backyard, create the resource. But there, what we see, the global market is, I mean the market agenda, is putting a lot of barrier or backlog to the people. For example, the poor people, they invest in tree planting, but then when they go to the market, they ask for certificate. They ask for saying, you know, many other things, you know, kind of certificate, permission, and or, you know, forest certification, for example, for their resource. So what the way that we can incentivize for people to plant a tree? For example, no matter, you know, you plant 1 tree, 2 trees, 3 trees, but to have an ownership to use it without a kind of backlog or without a kind of
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think it may be a similar question. Heath, do you want to try to give an answer?
Yeah, I think in the first part of my response on the previous question, what we really need to focus on is these accountable community structures. We have to realize that certification, particularly when we're talking about smallholders, is not always the answer. It's often too costly, too complicated, etc. So we really need to focus at alternative ways to verify the sustainable nature of the material that they're producing. And there are actually quite some approaches out there which have showcased success to a certain degree. And what we're currently looking at is how to then combine some of those approaches with both look at the benefit side, but also on the sustainability side of the matter. It's a bit vague, but I hope that addresses the question to a certain degree. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heath. Thank you to all our panelists. That ends our panel. Please join me in thanking Heath Broekink, Jim Chamberlain, Sandra Alfonso, Jörg Schweinle, and Mokena Makeka. Thank you. And as our panel leaves, I'd like to invite Robert Nassi from C4 ICRAF to come and to come and give us some concluding remarks. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, James. And I know that I'm here standing behind you and your well-deserved lunch or whatever rest. I mean, so I'm going to be brief, and I will certainly not try to summarize all what I said today. I mean, at this stage, if we are not all convinced that forest should play a huge role in the bioeconomy and that the circular bioeconomy should play a huge role in the way we manage our society, I mean, so that we need to rewind again, but fundamentally that's where we are. But now, what is it that produces oxygen, absorbs CO2, store carbon, and is beautiful to see? It's a tree. Huh? There is nothing else that does that. If you put many different trees together, you have a forest. And then with the forest comes biodiversity, comes ecosystem services, comes forest well-being. And people that are being stewards of the forest, be they government, local people, foresters, they have been dealing with bioeconomy since millennia. I mean, it's not something new. Or it may be something that becomes fashionable, and it becomes fashionable these days because of the problem that we have seen. I mean, so between now and 2050, we will have to build a city of 1 million people in Africa every 2 weeks. How are we going to do that is going to be critical in terms of whether we are going to have a civilization flourishing within 50 years, or if we're going simply to disappear. And so the question is, we are all convinced, but are we the one to be convinced? Who is here from the fossil fuel sector that has listened to that and has to be convinced? We are all foresters talking to foresters. So I think the next fight is to bring the fight to the other place. And just to remind you, the fossil fuel subsidies amount to $1 million a minute. And this is not a report of an obscure NGO somewhere. This is a report of the IMF in 2020. The agricultural subsidies it's $540 billion a year. 90% of this harms people and the environment. So why are we continuing to do that? Why are we not using the money we spend in fossil fuel subsidy or perverse agriculture subsidies in subsidizing bioeconomy, the circular bioeconomy, the forestry sector? So that's really the question that we need to ask, and how can we create this change in behavior? And I think it's, for the people that are in this room, is going out and really for the ones that are in decision-making place, talking to their colleague and say that we need to change. Because don't believe that the other sector, they will accept readily. I mean, in my own country, I mean, there is a strong fight these days between the concrete, cement, steel sector and the wood sector, and it goes to the constitutional court because they said, oh, the new regulation is create an unfair competitive advantage to the wood sector compared to us, concrete, steel, and so on. So I think we need really to go and outside, beyond the forest and beyond the forester, and tell the people that what we need to do is move into a circular bioeconomy, and that effectively forests and trees are a significant component of that, if not a critical component. And for that, we need to keep our forests standing. We need more forests. We need more wood producing, and we need more foresters, and we need more seawater for this forest. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed, Robert. That ends the session. Thank you all.